program, because she started the Texas Institute of the Arts 15, 16 years ago. Her name is Connie Calloway, and I'd like her to stand up so we can recognize her. Connie is the president of our foundation board and a very dynamic president of that. We love working with her. I have a couple of announcements. I think you've all heard us, Rhonda, me, everyone who lives here saying, please don't stop drinking that water. Even though I'm from Wisconsin, I'm saying drink water, not milk. Water. We do have a hospitality suite. This sounds a little strange. Pardon? Is it the background music? Maybe we can turn that off. I'm not sure. We do have a hospitality suite set up for this meeting. It's room 108, and that will be open and available to you between 8 in the morning and 10 at night. And feel free to hang out there. We'll have refreshments there. Just that's another place for you if there isn't a breakout session going on there. The other thing is, any of you who are hello? I work with singers. I can project. Some of you, there are quite a few of you on that 1:15 flight on Monday. That is the biggest group of people departing. Hello? Okay. That is the biggest group departing at any time. That is the one group that we will help reserve van service for. All the rest of you are on your own. You won't have trouble. You have a lot of phone numbers on your contact sheet. They're giving you good rates. Unusual for Aspen, but they are giving you good rates. And but please, if you're on that 1:15 flight, we anticipate it's probably oversold and therefore overbooked. Over, all of those things that United Airlines likes to do around here. So please do sign up so we can get that reserved, and we need you to sign up by the end of today. The shuttles to the reception at the Aspen Art Museum will be leaving the front of Aspen Square, the main Cooper Street side of the building, from 5 to 5:30 today. They're going to do 3 loops. It takes all of about 5 minutes to get over there. It takes all of about 10 minutes to walk there. So please don't delay. If you want to take that shuttle, just please be there and be prepared for the loops to come back around. And then coming back to the hotel between 7 and 7:30, they'll be shuttling you back. And all kinds of good dinner suggestions in your packets. Please take note of the fact that this is off-season, so a lot of restaurants do close. So you may have heard about a great place. Check the schedule to be sure that they're open. You probably don't need a reservation, but it never hurts to call and check. And we have some extra copies of the information that Victor put together on the Bach Sonata that we're going to be performing on Sunday. Not all of your packets have a copy of that. If you're missing it, please just see me and we'll get a copy of it to you. We thought you'd want to read about it before you hear the performance. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amelia.
Thank you so much, Debbie, and we are really enjoying ourselves here. And I am one of the vice presidents for the Association of Institutes for Aesthetic Education, and I would like to welcome all of you here and to say how pleased we are, especially to have our teaching artists with us. We're rich, rich, rich when you are with us, and so we are so pleased that we can have you with us this special meeting. As many of you know, Mark Shubert, who was the executive director of the Lincoln Center Institute, president of the board, passed away this year, and it was a very sad, monumental moment for all of us, especially those of us who have been with the Institute for a really long time. Mark had the vision, he had this idea, and he made it happen. And he brought along with him a number of wonderfully talented people to put forth this idea of aesthetic education. And really, I think we can all know that he is the reason that we're all here today together working for this cause that we so believe in. So when this happened, the members of the association thought very hard about what it is we would like to do to honor him. And we wanted to make sure that this honor was something that really fit him and what he did. And it was decided that we would establish a scholar, a fund for us to have a scholar come and be with us at each of our annual meetings to make sure that we stayed on track with aesthetic education, to help us think in that way, to broaden what we do, and to make sure that we were thinking intellectually in the manner that he so eloquently dreamed of and made come to be. So, today we are very excited because we have the first scholar, and we decided to name this wonderful new position the Squiggle Scholar because Mark wrote the book Hunting for the Squiggle, and we thought that appropriate. So we are very excited about this, and today we have the first of our Squiggle Scholars, and she is a very, very special person who was a partner in crime with Mark in all of this, the formation and the creation of these institutes. So Scott Nobby Brandon will introduce our first Squiggle Scholar.
Hello, I'm Scott Nobby Brandon, the Executive Director of the Lincoln Center Institute. And just to add a little bit to the history, in the mid-70s, when the Lincoln Center Institute was changing from a student program at Lincoln Center to the current formation, Mark did this study called The Hunting of the Squiggle and went to Teachers College and asked the then president of Teachers College, Larry Kremen, who on the faculty at Teachers College should work with aesthetic education. From what I've been told, since I was not there, there was one person who stood out among all the faculty, and obviously it was Maxine Greene. The idea was to make a connection between higher education and the educational enterprise at Lincoln Center. 25 years ago, Maxine started speaking to the teachers during our summer session, has delivered 80 lectures, man?
Close to.
80 lectures, and we know that because we're thrilled to announce that we're about to go to press on a book of Maxine's lectures that will be published by Teachers College Press that will be out next summer. Yes, we're all thrilled. And each summer, I've been at Lincoln Center about 13 years, I have the pleasure and opportunity to introduce Maxine to the teachers. And I've tried over the years to come up with the exact right way to introduce her. I mean, I say I love her, I say I've learned a tremendous amount from her, so that I can't believe that I'm fortunate enough to have her in my life. But the one thing that I can say, that I'll say over and over again, is that what she delivers and how she delivers are so in sync that it's a poet-philosopher. It's a poet-philosopher in the truest sense of the word. And it's that delivers the message, not just the message itself. And with that, our dear friend and beloved colleague, Maxine.
What will happen if I list that with my other duties? As a professor, I'm not sure, but I'm proud of it. And I'm very moved and very pleased to see so many of my friends here and to see people who are on the verge of coming into this organization. I'm especially delighted to know that Connie's here. I didn't know it till today, because Connie and I have a pleasant past to remember together. So I'm very glad she's here, and many of the others of you, like my adored Chris Goodhart, who many of you know, who has escaped us for the state of Washington, but it's a privilege to have her here. I worry a little bit and hope that that you share it in some way, that anyone believes there's a doctrine for aesthetic education, that it's written somewhere in stone, or that I'm a kind of guru of aesthetic education, which I'm not. And so I need to just say a word about where I come from, as they put it, and so that you know, and then make up your own minds, the sources of what we think of as aesthetic education. As Scott said, I do philosophy and philosophy of education, because now it seems like a good event. At the time it didn't. Because of my gender, they never let me into philosophy departments. For example, at Teachers College, it took 7 years after I got there for them to relent and allow a woman. And that only happened because Donna Shalala had come a year before trailing clouds of grants, and they couldn't say no to her, and it became impossible to say yes to me. But it was lucky in one sense because I was kind of thrust into the English department at Teachers College, and I'd never taken a course in English, but so it meant self-study, and got my sort of enhanced an obsession that I'd had since a child with literature. And then feeling a little sorry for me, I think the people in the English department knew that I taught a course at NYU called Philosophy and Literature, looking for the problem of freedom with Antigone and that kind. So this colleague said, well, maybe we'll squeeze in another course in addition to composition and all the rest of it. So I said, well, maybe philosophy and literature. He said, did you say philosophy and or philosophy of? So I said, oh, hell, philosophy of. And that was aesthetics. So all of a sudden I found myself, in the literature of aesthetics, not only for literature, I did that for a while, with literature as an art form, but also with other languages of art. So then that got me interested in a course that I've had till this year on aesthetics in education. And that helped feed some of the ideas that I have, and that you're always free to challenge. I think some of you know that where my philosophic orientation is concerned, I see myself as an existential philosopher and an experiential philosopher, connecting experiential with Dewey's philosophy. So it's very affected by Merleau-Ponty, by Sartre, by Hannah Arendt, as well as by a number of educators. So I guess many of you need to know that this idea, like many others, is one that we keep working on, keep wondering. I think one of the things I've communicated deliberately, but knowing not everybody shares that, is my sort of horror of passivity, or what Dewey used to call the anesthetic in life. The anesthetic as opposed to the aesthetic, the deadness. And without wanting to hurt anybody's feelings, the feeling I had at the last debate. It's something about that feeling, that sort of feeling of not moving, of being stuck, of not. So I've been a little crazy in emphasizing wide awakeness as a value, and that partly comes from existential thinking. I've been very interested because of that in the idea of choosing with a sense of agency. That's vitally important to me. In other words, you can't send a graduate student to Lincoln Center and ask her to come back and report on the Bach prelude she just heard. You have to be there in person where artworks are concerned. And the idea of agency is all important, from my view anyway, of aesthetics. Paying attention to our own experience, our own consciousness, and whatever happens between us and the work, the painting, the short story, the fugue. I'm interested in what happens between, in what some people, Hannah Arendt used to call the in-between. I don't want to focus just on the observer or the work of art, but the amazing event that occurs every time any one of you becomes deeply moved by, or stirred, or brought to new kinds of questioning by a work, even one that you've experienced before. From doing, I've taken, I don't think you mind that much, but the idea of art as experience, that a work of art can't be called a work of art until it becomes an object of experience, until somebody experiences it. And with the belief that when we do experience works of art, something happens. They're a perspective. When I teach aesthetics, it's very hard to define. I had to get past an essay that everybody used to quote called The Dreariness of Philosophical Aesthetics. No, I don't want to do that. But what I usually do is say that I think of aesthetics as a kind of ongoing response to the questions we raise after we've had an art experience. Like, for example, if I hear the Ode to Joy, or I read again the part of King Lear with King Lear on the Heath, and I get deeply moved, sometimes to tears, sometimes not. Do I explain that as something that happens from some transcendent level? In a way, I feel like that I'm in touch with something out there. Or is it that I'm somehow in touch with Beethoven, who is embodying his own perception, his own politics, his own hopes in a musical work? Or am I, should I be doing what I was told to do when I went first to college and decided not to major in English, was leave yourself home. You leave your own experience out of it. Leave your, just look at, they used to say, the poet itself, the poem itself. But forget your experience, forget your ground. And so many people still have an aesthetic based on that. Don't mess around with stories about your children or your trips to Europe. Focus on the portrait of an artist as a young man, or on the Vermeer painting. Just be distant from it. They used to use Kant's word, indifference. You know, you should be cool and detached and far-seeing. That's another approach in aesthetic. And the last one, there are others, but the last one is the one I think we've been emphasizing, and it's one that's more familiar now to English teachers than other approach. It's called the Pragmatic Approach, but what it really means is that a work of art has to be partially defined in terms of the response to it, the perceiver's response, the audience response. So those of you who are familiar with whole language or with constructivist thinking know what that is. It's a matter of not finding meaning in a work, but achieving it as meaningful by the way you deal with it, by the way you confront it, by the way in which you make it an object of your experience. One of the people who has been instrumental, really, in developing that reader response theory is someone some of you may have heard of, Louise Rosenblatt, have you? Very much in, and I took a course, my one English course was with her at Barnard, and we studied pre-Elizabethan dramatists. I don't know what good that did. And later we were colleagues at NYU, and we sort of kept in touch. And I just heard from her the other day, and I have to say that, because I had written her in some detail about what we do here, and she said, you know, if I had known, I might have been one of those. there's a lot in common between what some of you are doing, but not what all of you are doing. And I think there's a lot in common with the reform movement in the schools that is based on some Deweyan thought, that is based on some existential thought. But then when you hear our great leaders talking about education and only mentioning assessment and standard, you have to take your choice. You have to make your choice because the dominant mode is not the one we're talking about. And I think we have to realize that. We're a sacred remnant, but we're not the majority. And so that's one reason why I think we have to refine what we think about what we love and what's possible. And as I was saying to Chris's colleague, we have to learn how to talk about it, we have to learn how to write about it, we have to learn how to break through those great differences between us and the efficiency engineers that so many of whom seem to be taking care of public schools today. So in a way we're on a new frontier, and it's not good. We're not going to win out easily, wonderful as it is. So I think in some way we should feel privileged, but we should also realize the kind of responsibility we have if we believe this stuff, because it's not loadish today, and it's important to know. I almost always start with Emily Dickinson, so just two lines that are familiar to you. I dwell in possibility of fairer house, a fairer house, isn't that terrible? Then, do you know the second one? You do. A fairer house than most. More numerous of windows, superior of doors. That linking of possibility to multiple windows, to multiple vistas, has an awful lot to do, I think, with what we do and what we want to do. What you do, you people who chair these various institutes, and what I do, I think may be thought of as both private and public. Like the practicing artists among us, I like to think we're tapping deep wells of experience, that the more we encounter works of art, the reflectively and imaginatively and intuitively and perceptively, the more we wonder about the ways in which a novel, when grasped by our experience, in some sense changes our life. I was teaching, and what I'm saying, what I'm hoping, is that you who are responsible for these institutes go through the same wondering, the same wonder, the same questioning that you would be doing if you were in my spot or if you were a working artist. You're not a manager. There's something very different between what you're doing and managers of other Arts Connection groups. And I think you should realize that. And it's important. And I'm hoping some of the questions I ask are familiar to some of you. Like, for example, talking about wondering about things. This term, the last 2 weeks, for the fourth time probably, although I've read the novel probably more than 4 times, I was teaching Emma Bovary, or teaching Madame Bovary. And I know it well. I thought I knew it well, as most of you, I think, know it well. But what I found was new possibilities of vision, new ways of becoming aware, and new ways of questioning. Emma Bovary, as you know, was given to reading romantic novels as a child in the convent, and then she grows up with a kind of hallucinated vision of what the life should be like. It should have money, it should have nice clothes, it should have coaches and wonderful balls, and it should have either a man who was a dark, mysterious stranger, always on a horse, or a sort of delicate, poetic creature, equally romantic. And when I was reading it, I was asking myself, you know, about illusion and the role of illusion in my life, and asking myself questions about imagination, which I so often have. And then I sort of realized in talking to the students about it, one of the problems with Emma Bovary is that she never grew up. She was fixated at about age 18 or less, 15 maybe. And then I thought, as a feminist, you should excuse me, you know, that one of the meanings of oppression is infantilization, never being given a chance to grow up, to have choices. Emma Bovary had very few choices. She married to a doctor. She lived in a little town. But to be condemned to a life like that can be one of the worst forms of oppression. So I went through all kinds of new questions for me because I taught Madame Bovary again. And works of art are like that. You know, they're inexhaustible. There's always something new, I think, that you can find. And I think it's important to know that. I think about the other arts as well. Arts I may not know as well as I know literature, but knowing that each one is evolving a language of art. They're distinctive, the languages of dance, the languages of painting. They're all distinctive languages as you're learning from your teaching artists, and I'm convinced, as others of us are in aesthetic education, that the chance of having aesthetic experience is far less if no one helps you see, no one helps you listen, no one helps initiate you into the wonders of dance and film and drama. And so that's why the teaching artists are so new, so fundamental in this way of teaching. In a whole business of attending, I used to write about doing and attending in this institute. Doing is what you do in the workshops, what people do in the workshops, and attending is being present at a dance, and for the first time, many times, knowing what it is to notice what is there to be noticed. And in addition to that, and particularly wonderful to me, is the ability, for example, to go to a dance performance not simply as a cognitive person, but as a physical person, a perceptive person, an imaginative person. It makes all the difference in the world. I used to say, I'd go to ballet and wait for Giselle to die, and I didn't really care about what happened, because nobody helped me look at the turn of her foot, or the hand, or the way she and Albrecht have of reaching each other and drawing apart from each other. I needed that. I needed a teaching artist, to open my eyes to realizations of things I hadn't even thought about particularly. So it's a delicate job, and such an important job. If you, like me, believe in that sense of agency and the importance of it, what you're doing is leaving people free to be. A few of us had lunch together a couple of weeks ago. We were sort of going through our private memories of Mark Shubert, and all of us had different ways of loving him, I guess. And he used to call me his partner in crime, and I was kind of flattered by that. All of us would say we never really knew him. He wasn't the kind of man you snuggled up to, but he was the kind of man who released something in all of us, something it's different in all of us. But Chris will say that, I think, and Kathy will say that, and Scott will say that. And that's what we're hoping you're doing, and we think you're doing, you working artists, releasing something, some power, some energy as people begin to find out what it's all about. And what it's all about takes work, as Dewey said, takes tending, and it is not easy. Where painting is concerned, for example, I was also, because my class tries to relate painting and literature and philosophy, the particular class. So we were reading Wordsworth, and in connection with Wordsworth, I was showing Constable paintings and Turner paintings. And some of you know Constable paintings, how influenced he was by Wordsworth, and how he had to return to his own home place to create the landscapes he created. He had to feel the roughness of the fence posts to return to his lake country, to his farming country. He was the first one, I think you know, who painted outside his studio, who painted out in the field, and who used what used to be called the nasty color green. They were using gradations of brown, studio brown, in landscapes. But he used green as he went out into the air. And when we can make possible a kind of highlighting of noticing of what your consciousness can do when you look at a constable, I started to become fascinated with the number of paintings that showed roads leading off somewhere. I thought, that's an emblem for me, you know? That, like, I'll never catch the squeal because the squeal goes on and on. The same with the road. And that's partly, I think, what we do. I could say more about dance, about what I learned about Paul Taylor from artists here, artists of dance, people like my friend, who most of you unfortunately don't probably know anymore, Joanne Robinson, and others. But I know she helped me look at Paul Taylor. I could look at him and love it, but I didn't know what I was looking at, you know. And but it was Joanne and other artists, I think, helped me get a growing awareness of the way shape is created in space, how each dancer would somehow manage to do that, the designs that could be created, and the flingy movements and the qualities discovered in this movement. And again, I was able, I hope, to attend very differently, again with my body, you know, again with my mind, again with my sensuality, such as it is, and because of my own experiences, and knowing the difference between that terrible course called art appreciation when I was there, and what we do here. And the thing I hated about art appreciation is, again, you were supposed to leave yourself home and listen to the wise person as he showed one slide after another slide, and you'd have Rembrandt and the date, and that's what you knew. You knew the labels, and so you could go to cocktail parties and talk a little, you know, talking of Michelangelo. But this is so different because of its demand for, its demand that we reach toward the work of art, that we create meaning as we move toward it. And part of our effort is to help people see. And I couldn't help thinking before, looking out of the window here at the view, which is so incredible. Those, I guess they're aspen trees, those yellow aspens sort of advancing toward that mountain, and the shadow on the mountain, and, you know, and the way the form of the mountain sort of jolts, sort of thrusts toward you. It made that kind of thing makes me look at a Cézanne mountain very differently, even as Cézanne's Mont Saint-Victoire or the viaduct, especially the viaduct, made me see what I wouldn't have seen here. That's the other part of it, that art makes you see it, art makes you feel. If somebody tell me if I'm going on to clear your throat, man. I won't be much longer. But anyway, we want to help people to see what's there, to perceive against the background of their own lived life. And I think Dewey used to talk about breaking through the crust of the conventional. I always liked that, which is another thing we're doing. Dewey talking about what is so important, not so much of what's happening on the surface of a painting or a dance performance, but the kindling by it of our emotion, perception, and appreciation. What's important is what happens below, and can only happen because of a contact, with an art form. I know Dewey's bad reputation. I know he's supposed to be very hard to read, but I'm sort of getting enamored of him again because, as some of you know, I've been very obsessive about imagination because it's the capacity left out of all those education reports. It's never mentioned, and it seems so terribly important to me to look at things as if they could be otherwise. That's to imagine. But I was doing something the other day, and it was such a wonderful discovery for me. In an early book of Dewey's, he talks about facts being repellent. He says, facts are main things. They are repellent until imagination takes hold and opens new vistas on intellectual possibility. What do you need for your school board better than that? You know, it doesn't mean that you're going to learn math better, but it learns you're in a different. For example, again with the debates, he talks about how much of ordinary converse is trivial and boring. And then he said, whereas if you touch the deeper levels that art makes possible, it would dramatize, it would transmute the kind of debates we have, the kind of conversation. Like you look at Bush and you say, supposing he were to tap what we dare to call desire. That's what the arts can do. And again, I'm sorry if some of you are devoted Bushites, but it was such an example to me. What I think most of us want to move past. I also want to make this point, and you've heard this before. I think it's very important also, not that we move past the idea that the arts make you better, or that they soothe you, or they answer everything for you. I think you have to realize that the arts can get you crazy and upset your certainties, and that's why I'm so obsessed with them. Because but this poem says so much of it. It's by Rita Dove, who was the poet laureate before Pinsky. Open it, go ahead, it won't bite. Well, maybe a little, maybe more than a nip like, a tingle. It's pleasurable, really. You see, it keeps on opening. You may fall in. Sure, it's hard to get started. Remember learning to use knife and fork? Dig in. You'll never reach bottom. It's not like it's the end of the world, just the world as you think you know it. That's wonderful to me. And that makes aesthetics, education, or whatever you want to call it, we do, different than other subject matters. You know, aesthetics or encounters with the art make you revise or transmute what you think you know, make you break through the taken for granted, instead of writing notes, writing your notes on the taken for granted, because that's going to make you pass the course. I have just a little more to say. I get interested in what I'm saying, and I can't. One thing, I have to say just a little bit about this. I've been, as Eric knows, because he was part of it at the beginning, I've been trying to nurture a Center for Social Imagination, the Arts and Education Teachers College. Eric knows because he helped me start it, but then now we run it through bureaucrats who live at the college. I mean, it's a little different that we weren't lucky enough to keep him. But one of the things I can't help but be interested in, especially today, you know, with the sound of Israel over there and the amount of suffering in our own country, I don't want people to think of me or you as art for art's sake people. And I want to go a little beyond that and ask ourselves, without making propaganda out of what we do, can we possibly say that the arts do feed in? Prasad used to say that if an a book or a painting can appeal to your indignation, it's doing something important, or appeal to your freedom. So you don't just sit there and say, well, great. You choose yourself for something. So I want to think about a lot. I don't want agitprop, you know, I don't want political stuff in the, but I do want us to be aware of, and help our students be aware of the suffering and of the need for social justice. I want to make people uneasy, and I think you should want to make people uneasy about, you know, being so lucky, and at least noticing. Just this and a little more, and if some of you heard this, I'm sorry. Adrienne Rich, whom I adore, along with Elizabeth Bishop and along with Rita Dove and Robert Pinsky, and I could go on, and Maddie Holzer, who's a poet. Adrienne Rich wrote a poem, What Kind of Times Are These? And she wrote about our country moving closer to its own truth and dread, its own ways of making people disappear. And then she said, I won't tell you where the place is, the dark mesh of the woods meeting an unmarked strip of light, ghost-written crossroads, leaf mold paradise. I know already who wants to buy it, sell it, make it disappear. And I won't tell you where it is. So why do I tell you anything? Because you still listen. Because in times like these, to have you listen at all, it's necessary to talk about trees. And then she told Bill Moyers that there are different kinds of dread for different kinds of people. And she said, I think that more and more people feel uncared for, that feel that their lives are not only unvalued but meaningless, feel that though they may care for their lives, no one else will, feel that the only way they can protect their survival and interests is by the gun. I'm afraid that many people feel an enormous desperation which plays into the propaganda of hate. And then Moyers said, how could she say such bitter things and still write such affirmative poems? And she said, if poetry is forced by the conditions in which it is created to speak of dread and of bitter, bitter conditions, by its very nature, poetry speaks to something different. That's that road that leads off the Constable painting. That's why poetry can bring together those parts of us which exist in dread and those which have the surviving sense of a possible happiness, collectivity, community, a loss of isolation. She's talking also about possibility, and to talk also about what might be, and saying happiness, collectivity, community, not just a good job, a new computer, you know, not just that, but so that you can be in the world as a live being and not simply somebody who possesses enough things. I'm so eager to say that. I have more, but I'm going to stop with another metaphor with Adrienne Rich again. She calls it a revolutionary, she calls it a revolutionary poem, oh, I'm sorry, that reminds you, that reminds you when and how you are living and might live. It's not programmatic, she says, searching for words that will burn true. It is written out of one individual's confrontation with her own longings in the belief that readers or hearers deserve an art as complex, as open to contradiction as in themselves. And then she talks about transmuting indifference and sorrow, no longer into some drenching recognition of what if, the possible. So I've been trying to say that's where it all begins. And I hope you have your own wonderful beginnings, and thank you very much. I appreciate you all. You can imagine. You were the best because you were responding to the thinking like that. So thanks all of you for your welcome.
Well, I just have to say something you do for us. This connects to a thought you just sent me on too, is I think you've identified, and we've talked about this in different places, but you really identified that a primary enemy that we're all united against is isolation.
Yeah.
Isolation of artists, isolation of teachers, isolation among communities we talk to, but also you're helping us not be isolated from each other, giving us a vocabulary and images, and that's, I'm so grateful for that.
Okay.
It makes us feel less isolated out there, starting our new institute to feel part of this. And your the images that you put out to us that we can attach to are so powerful. So thank you.
I have to say, you know how grateful I am. I was telling Chris before and her friend, I can't, how I got to be here today. I mean, it seems so unlikely when I was younger, you know, that and one of the most, and this isn't kidding and they know it, one of the most significant experiences in my life in the last 20 years has been my friendships with the teaching artists. I never thought I'd be so lucky. I used to tell people I lived a kind of Woody Allen life, you know. But to meet, I couldn't even list the number of people who changed my life. So that, and they helped me find that language, and I'm hoping all of you will find that language, find your language.
One of the things I find so wonderful, which was a wonderful before, is that when you speak and what you've written is really so poetic in and of itself. And as somebody said, I think quoted Eric, something Eric said is, you are what you preach in a certain sense. And I think that's important for all of us, is that when we make our statements, write our papers, publish our brochures, we have to speak with this same kind of imaginative language. I think it's dangerous to fall into the trap of being academic. But on the other hand, we are going to be talking with people who may not know our language. So
it's very difficult. And I know some of my colleagues here get impatient with me because I've been teaching in Teachers College since 1966, if you can imagine. And I'm more impatient with what you called academic language, and I call pedagogues, you know, the language of teacher education, than you can imagine, you know. And anything that seems to suggest to me that the Institute is moving toward the pedagogical norm gets me crazy, you know. So we do, you all have to read a lot of poetry, move a lot, get metaphors in your, you know, in your sack. It's just the other thing that is a little crazy. I think you people who are in dance, because I'm so interested in the embodied consciousness and the physical being in the world, I worry about kids who are so fascinated by computers they stick with them and they don't move. And I think there should be movement exercises or a dance class before or after a computer period, because it's very dangerous. I don't know what these children are going to turn into until they can celebrate themselves in space and time and move. And it shouldn't be a joke, because it really worries me. Not only do I worry about their health, I worry that they'll become like Aldous Huxley's deltas, you know, I worry that they'll be couch potatoes forever, no matter how wonderful the computer is. And part of what we have to do is wake them up, as we have to wake our colleagues up. I better shut up.
We can shut you up if we really wanted to.
Well.
Maxine, we were talking at lunch about the two of us having grown up in rural areas,
Yeah.
and being very in touch with nature, and that it engendered in us some innate aesthetic sense.
Yeah.
And I think along the lines of the computers,
Yeah.
we have to battle so desperately that dearth. And not just in the kids, but it's in the teachers.
Oh, sure. And then to think about, ask my students to think about, of course you can have an aesthetic experience with those mountains, you know, as you can with Cezanne. The difference is those mountains were not made for our pleasure. And Cezanne selected out various perceptions he had and then created. But I just think it's relevant to what you're saying. In trying to keep this center alive, I have conferences every year. So this year I decided to call it The City and the Lost Landscape. You know, partly because of the fact that so many children come from islands or from rural places, and then we put them in the Bronx, where there's not even a park, or I try to use a landscape metaphorically as your perceived world. So I think there's a lot we can do about that, and should, given the immigration we have, given the strangers among us. I'm glad you said that.
Maxine, I think I'm speaking for everyone, that one of the highlights of my life is knowing you
Oh,
and
Shelley.
hearing you speak, and your words come alive when I read it, but when you speak like that, it's just really touching.
You know I love you, but
I love you too. But it really does feel it.
Thank you, Shelley. That is so okay, let's go.
Maxine, we really do thank you, and we are asking Maxine to help us in our selection of future school scholars, because she is it. She is the ultimate.
No one can swim.
No one can swim. So we do really appreciate this, and it's such an honor that you came all the way here. And I know the new institute, I know how much it means to me, and I've been around for so long, and I know the new institute people, I just know exactly what you're saying. It's just what you need to be able to continue. So thank you, and thank everybody for your participation. Yes.
I just wanted to announce really quickly that Maxine and I are going out to dinner, and we would like to invite as many of you who would like to come.
Can we rent an auditorium?
I said that. But we have reservations for how many people? 16 plus. 16 plus. They're prepared that it's a group that will grow. We'll post it in the lobby, actually. It's Los Feria? Los Feria. It's one block, the opposite direction of the Athens Square. It's a great here.